another breaking story of independent reporting and original reporting, very important reporting that was published today about the extent of the Israeli influence operation machine inside the United States. And it was done by two highly accomplished independent journalists. Lee Fang is one of them. He was a colleague of mine back at The Intercept, and after wisely leaving that outlet before it completely sunk into the sea, he is now doing that work at his own Substack, where he regularly breaks big stories using standard and tireless investigative techniques, which is why he is so often on our show, because he's constantly breaking those kind of stories through just sheer hard investigative work. His co-author on this story is Jack Paulson, who is an independent journalist who focuses on the intersection of technology and the military. He completed his PhD in computational and applied mathematics at UT Austin in 2012, before serving as an assistant professor of computational science and engineering at Georgia Tech, and then an assistant professor of mathematics at Stanford University. The duo teamed up to publish a journalistic investigation that was published today in collaboration with The Guardian into the extent of the Israeli influence campaign aimed at the United States. The article there you see on the screen is entitled, quote, "Israeli Documents Show Expansive Covert U.S. Influence Campaign. Israeli government officials closely coordinate with advocacy groups, shaping congressional and state legislation, social media, and campus discourse." Now, this is obviously a topic that we have been covering quite some time. We think it is of the utmost importance that there is a foreign country who is working very hard with a lot of money to not only influence public opinion in the United States, but also the laws that the states and our federal legislature enact that have a very direct relationship with that foreign government. And we are delighted to welcome both of them to the show. Good evening. It's great to see you guys both. Congratulations on the story. And I just want to kind of dive right into these questions, because I do have a fair number of them. And I guess you guys can decide amongst yourselves who's going to answer. If you want, I can just direct them. But let me ask each of you, actually. And Jack, you can go first. As I said, there's been a lot of reporting recently, over many years, but as well as recently, about the extent of what the Israelis are doing to influence American politics, the lawmaking process, American public opinion. What is one or two of what you think are the most significant new revelations in the story that you published?
Yeah, so there's a U.S. nonprofit called the Institute for the Study of Global Anti-Semitism and Policy, which is a bit of a mouthful. They're pronounced ISGAP typically. It was originally a center within Yale. It was kind of kicked out in 2011 for not being sufficiently rigorous. And what I think hasn't really been paid attention to is that they have publicly claimed credit for the hearings that led to the firings of the several university presidents. For example, in particular, claiming credit for the December 5th hearings in front of Congress, where Elise Stefanik really grilled Harvard President Claudine Gay. And basically, we trace out what led to that. In particular, there are reports on alleged Qatari influence on U.S. student campus protests, and then how that fits into broader kind of formal public-private partnership that's pretty widely reported, known as CONCERT, or it's undergone several different names. It kind of uses all of them interchangeably to this day. Originally, it was Kella Shlomo, then it was CONCERT, and now it's Voices of Israel. And it's really a way for the Israeli government to chip in half the money, and then for philanthropists in the US and around the world to chip in the other half to fund kind of pro-Israeli nonprofits to advocate and lobby on behalf of the Israeli government.
So Lee, if you want to pick out one or two nuggets of the story that you think provides kind of new revelations about the influence campaign by this foreign government inside the United States, please do so. But also let me just add to that the kind of broader perspective of what the significance is of the fact that Israel is doing this.
Well, look, just a few weeks into the Gaza war, there was a discussion in the Knesset, the Israeli parliament, about what to do around all of these students at universities, particularly elite universities, where there's a lot of influence in American society, that were critical of Israel. And there was a government minister, Amichai Chikli, who said, "Don't worry, we're going on the offensive." And I'm paraphrasing him. And we're going to do it in the concert way. And he's referencing what Jack was just talking about, this kind of semi-covert organization that's controlled by the Israeli government, that's run these kind of covert PR campaigns in the past. You know, they were set up to be a quote, PR commando unit to control kind of troll armies on social media, to lobby in the US, to actually help pass laws in the US. They were partially responsible for the passage of anti-BDS laws over the last few years in state capitals around the country. Well, after October 7th, there was a relaunch of this unit, and it's partnering with a number of groups. Some of its partners are doing outreach to Black Democrats. They have a partner organization in the U.S. that's mobilizing support from lawmakers from the African American community. Many of their former leaders are working with a NGO that's an Israeli NGO, but very active in the U.S. that's helping Meta, you know, that's Facebook and WhatsApp and Instagram, as well as TikTok, censor media. And, you know, they're using the same rubric that, you know, many other NGOs use, Media Matters and ADL and others, saying that, you know, we're just here to provide assistance in stopping misinformation, disinformation, hate speech. But they're very clearly working with the Israeli government and censoring it and content moderating speech that's critical of Israel. In addition to all of that, just as this same entity that worked to pass anti-BDS laws in the past, and that's been well documented, what we're documented here that's completely new is that they are openly discussing their strategy to pass laws like the IHRA, International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance definition of anti-Semitism, and to basically encode that into U.S. law, state law, federal law. We saw the passage of the bill in the House last month on education policy, but there's similar laws around the country that basically say that a form of illegal discrimination, of anti-Semitism, is certain forms of harsh criticism. You know, it's saying terms like, or slogans like, Israel is a racist country. That can be viewed as a hate crime or as an illegal form of discrimination. That's a big part of their agenda, redefining the term anti-Semitism to stifle certain criticisms of Israel. And we were able to obtain exclusive documents showing that even the Israeli Foreign Ministry has been in touch with these local state lawmakers in Florida to pass this type of legislation. They're openly talking about it in the Knesset. They're saying this is their top priority. They're saying they're very clear in discussing their strategy. You know, we looked at transcripts, we looked at various business filings, public documents, government contracts. We really blend together a lot of sources to tell the story.
Yeah, absolutely. I really encourage people to read it on their own. We're not going to be able to do every part of it justice. Here tonight, I want to kind of highlight the important parts and then draw out the implications. Yeah, I just want to add one thing, which is the very first story that I ever reported in my entire life on the question of big tech censorship at the behest of governments was at the end of 2015, maybe the beginning of 2016, when there was a document that was released showing that the Israeli government had an ongoing relationship with the top leadership of Facebook, where they were able to submit lists of Facebook pages that the Israeli government alleged were promoting terrorism or were in some way inciting hatred toward Israel. And that basically means any page run by Palestinians that were critical of Israel. And in something like 98% of the cases, Facebook was taking these requests and approving them and banning whatever accounts the Israelis indicated. And of course, this has been going on since then, where they've been meeting, Israel has, with big tech companies and saying, we demand that you remove, quote, disinformation. And one of the things they listed as disinformation was the idea that the Israeli military actually killed some of their own citizens on October 7th, something that is now proven beyond any shadow of a doubt is true. The Israeli government even acknowledges that. So they're trying to prevent, and again, not in Israel, but in the United States, the ability for Americans to express certain views, and yet another example where parts of the right have been indignant about this sort of government big tech collaboration to censor, and this is one of those areas where magically the pro-Israel part of the right seems to have no problem. Jack, let me ask you, and actually I want to hear your view on this as well, Lee. There's been this kind of obsession on the part of certain segments of the American punditry with what's going on in American colleges for quite some time. And there's always been this kind of strange, you could even say creepy dynamic where like 45-year-old writers for like the New Republic, like, New York Magazine and those kind of places are just constantly focused on what 19 and 20-year-olds are doing and writing articles about that on college campuses. Like, one of the arguments you could make is that, well, the reason you have to focus on that is because these people and those trends become, in the future, the leaders or shaping our culture. But one of the things I've started to believe over the last kind of 18 months to 24 months, a lot of those pundits who have been focused on colleges happen to be among the most vocal supporters of the Israeli government in all of US media. They justify this focus on colleges under an anti-woke banner, like people like Barry Weiss and Ben Shapiro, that whole crowd. And at the same time, there have been strategy documents from the Israeli government saying the most important thing that we need to do is focus on American college campuses and prevent the growth of anti-Israel sentiment on American college campuses because that is such a threat to our national interests. What have you been able to discover in this new reporting about the priority that the Israeli government has been giving to try and control or influence American citizens or American college campuses?
I would say that that's actually been pretty consistent since the start of Concert, or Kela Shlomo, as it was known before. I think this was actually pretty well, the focus on campuses was pretty well documented by some undercover footage collected by an Al Jazeera journalist that was actually lobbied not to be formally released in the United States, but eventually was through the Electronic Intifada. And the wording that was used was really that, hey, every politician at some point was in college. And so if you really want to impact future leaders, you should do this. In terms of the methodology for how that's being done, I think the focus has really been on pushing for reports in a sort of pseudo-academic way that Qatar is secretly bankrolling in behind all of the protests, and then to push through closed-door congressional meetings for investigations into the financing of these student groups. And so one of the lines, in this article was linking to a May 7th meeting between the head of this nonprofit ISGAP with a House Oversight Committee, and then the next week there's a letter submitted to Janet Yellen demanding an investigation into these students, and then ISGAP claims credit. And so to some degree, I would say lawfare is a central component of this, and kind of mapping out how that lawfare works is part of the interest.
Lee, I wanted to ask you about that as well, the kind of obsession of the Israeli government and a lot of pro-Israel pundits inside the United States with what's going on campus. And you have this paragraph in your article that relates to this, because I think a lot of and I'm going to read it in a second, but I think a lot of the concern on the Israeli government is that the boycott, divestment, and sanctions activism that brought down or helped bring down the apartheid government in South Africa in the 1980s might also do the same to the Israeli government or to the Israeli occupation. And a lot of that activism came in the 1980s from colleges and now is coming again from colleges, as we've seen with the protests against the Israeli war in Gaza. So one of the things that I've been most disturbed by are the enactment of these laws in 24 American states that basically require, as a condition for having contract work with the state, that you sign a pledge that you don't believe in and will not participate in any boycott of the state of Israel. You can boycott any other country you want. You can boycott American states, just not the Israeli government. And you have to sign a pledge about this foreign government in order to get a job inside the United States with a state. And here's the paragraph that you have that I'm interested in. You said, quote, "The concert remark referred to a sprawling relaunch of a controversial Israeli government program, initially known as Kaya Shlomo, designed to carry out what Israelis called, quote, mass consciousness activities, targeted largely at the US and Europe. Concert, now known as Voices of Israel, previously worked with groups spearheading a campaign to pass so-called, quote, anti-BDS state laws that penalize Americans for engaging in boycotts or other nonviolent protests of Israel." You know, it was bad enough when I thought that, you know, like Israel-obsessed politicians in the Democratic Party or evangelical-obsessed politicians, evangelical politicians obsessed with Israel in the Republican Party were passing these kind of assaults on our free speech rights inside the United States. But it turns out that the Israeli government is playing a major role in that. What is that role?
Well, historically, and now what's continued on to today with the post-October 7th campaign, there's this kind of duality where the Ministry of Diaspora Affairs and previously the Ministry of Strategic Affairs in Israel, they set up these public benefit corporations that are used to funnel Israeli and some private money to certain organizations to carry out these legislative goals. So previously, it was a focus on these anti-BDS laws, very successful in that. And now it's the IHRA. But, you know, just in terms of reporting this story, it's fascinating because, you know, we were going into the minutia of the Knesset hearings where government ministers and experts openly, you know, they have public broadcasts and transcripts to their credit discussing strategy of what they're doing. And, you know, they're saying that we really need to focus on these elite colleges. These elite colleges, as Jack said, will become the leaders of tomorrow, but also they are kind of the opinion setters. More mid-tier or lower colleges, they mimic what the elite colleges do. It influences the culture. So they are laser focused on shaping what happens on these college campuses. So in addition to what I mentioned earlier, they're providing money through a sister kind of public benefit corporation called Mosaic United that funds major Jewish and pro-Israel student groups. That's Hillel, that's Chabad on campus. And they're asking them to provide intelligence reports, essentially monitoring the Palestinian student groups, lobbying the university administrators to kick out certain pro-Palestinian or groups that are critical of Israel. They're taking kind of a really expansive role in influencing these campuses. And just to back up a little bit, you know, in terms of how they pass these laws, we've seen from really important investigative reporting from Israeli journalists in the past, looking into these very similar programs, there was money sent from the Israeli government to certain Christian Zionist groups in America. The Israeli Allies Foundation, which is, you know, supported by Mike Pence and many Republican lawmakers. Christians United for Israel, that's Pastor John Hagee, who's, you know, close to Ted Cruz and Nikki Haley. These groups were supporting the push for the anti-BDS laws. They lobby Congress, they lobby the state legislatures every day. They're lobbying again for this same round of laws that attempt to curtail speech that's critical of Israel. So it's a lot of the same playbook that was documented 5 or 6 years ago with the BDS campaign. We've just compiled the documents and other forms of evidence to show that it's been relaunched. There's been a new injection of money and a new push that's, again, focused on in Congress, focused on these college campuses.
Yeah, there was this article in The Atlantic from a couple months ago by Theo Baker, who sort of like the embodiment of a Nepo baby in journalism. His father, I think they identify as non-binary with the pronouns they, them, so let me try and respect that. Their father is Peter Baker, who's the New York Times chief Washington bureau correspondent, and their mother is Susan Glasser, who has worked with The New Yorker and Politico, and of course, lo and behold, they get the opportunity that almost no other 20-year-old gets to write this major article for The Atlantic, edited by Jeffrey Goldberg, in which Theo Baker describes being a student at Stanford. He kind of tattles on all the different activists, anti-Israel activists things they've said, things they've done. It's exactly this kind of like student-to-student surveillance and creating dossiers of people who are critical of this foreign country on American campuses. Now, Jack, let me ask you, because Lee mentioned Hillel, and when I was in college, Hillel was a very influential group. It's generally a group of Jewish students whose main cause is Israel. And Lee was describing the part of your reporting in this article that linked the Israeli government and its funding to Hillel and the encouragement of Hillel to kind of be the arm of the Israeli government on American college campuses. One of the people you mentioned was someone named Adam Lehman, who's the chairman of Hillel, and this visit that he made to the Knesset, the Israeli legislature, in February of 2024, where he eventually reported to them or boasted of the kind of surveillance activities in which they're engaged in the United States on behalf of Israel. Let's show this part of this speech that he gave to the Knesset.
The great American Jewish community. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I'd like to give Adam Lehman.
Thank you very much.
Hillel International.
Yes, from Hillel International. Thank you, Chairman Ford. Thank you to the other esteemed members of the committee. We're honored to be here. I want to talk about what's happening on college campuses. Isolated incident from more of an epidemic, and this truly has become that epidemic. What are we doing about it? Very importantly, we have great partners in Israel, and I want to give credit to the Jewish Agency for Israel through our partnership of having 80 shlichim on our campuses. That's been fundamental. Our Mosaic United partnership, supported through the Ministry of Diaspora Affairs, has been very important as well. Our fighting back is legal, and we cannot fall short of using every legal channel available. We have been, as Harriet pointed out, lobbying aggressively with the United States government to make sure that they are enforcing Title VI of the Civil Rights Act. That is making an enormous difference. We have more than 60 investigations now publicly announced, and that matters. We have something called the Campus Anti-Semitism Legal Line, which is a partnership with the Brandeis Center and ADL, where we've had more than 400 students be able to report the issues that they have encountered and receive direct legal advice so they can bring action. We are working with university administrators to get them to change policies to protect Jewish students and to make sure that Israel is not demonized on campus and that Jewish students can be safely Jewish and Zionist at the same time. We have 75 universities now who are part of what we call the Campus Climate Initiative doing that work. And finally, we are educating. We are an educational institution working in educational environments, and we need to continue to break through the horrible propaganda which demonizes Israel. We have something right now, a teach-in tour that's going to 200 campuses, bringing Israel educators, including from Israel as well as from North America, doing that work. I'll close just by pointing out a few signs of hope. Of course, we have to take seriously the...
Okay, so Jack, I mean, someone might hear that and say, I don't know, that seems pretty benign to me. You have a chairman of a group, Hillel International, that operates on American college campuses, and he went to Israel to kind of report on their successes in promoting the cause of Israel on American campuses. Why is this something that ought to be of concern to us?
Well, right after you cut off clip is where Lehman claims credit for MIT's president disbanding their chapter of what he refers to as SJP, or Students for Justice in Palestine.
Let me interrupt you because I did accidentally do that. Let's just hear him saying that part quickly, and then I want to go back to you.
But we are going to prevail on campus, just like Israel will prevail in its war here. We are changing administrations. Just last week, MIT, the same president who was lambasted in front of Congress, took the step of fully suspending her Students for Justice in Palestine chapter for crossing lines and for creating an unwelcome environment for Jewish students. We've had now dozens of administrations change policy, and this is going to make a difference on campus today. And finally, we need to invest in...
All right, so there are a lot of seeming successes they've had that he's reporting to the state of Israel about their ability to influence American college campuses, but when I interrupted you, I was asking you, what's wrong with that? Why should people be concerned about that?
These are fundamentally nonprofits in the United States being funded by and working hand in glove with the Israeli government to shut down the free speech of college students. I would say that's kind of the bottom line, but in terms of the mechanism, obviously the redefinition of anti-Semitism has, if you listen to the words of Natan Sharansky, who's a central figure in our reporting, who's the former Minister of Diaspora Affairs circa 2003 to 2006, very famous for being arrested by the Soviet Union, allegedly for working with the CIA. And if you listen to his actual history of the definition of IHRA, it's actually the entire purpose was to oppose a call at the UN in 2001, right before 9/11, in fact, that referred to Israel as an apartheid state. And then over time, it ramped up specifically to oppose BDS. And so I would say the entire purpose of this redefinition is to shut down the free speech of these college students. And so, yeah.
All right, Lee, just to wrap this up, because we do have a couple more updates on the Julian Assange story that we want to cover before we sign off for the night. And again, I really encourage people to go and look at your article. I believe it's on the Guardian site, but also on your Substack, where people should, I hope, would go and read it and would support the work that you're doing there, because this is the kind of work you do regularly. And we'll put the link in the notes to the show as well. But I just wanted to raise this issue, which is the question of AIPAC's influence inside the United States. We did a show on that last night, or the other night, in terms of their attempt to remove Jamal Bowman from Congress for his refusal to be sufficiently supportive of Israel and the kind of singular power they have to do things like that inside the United States. There's always been this question that, we do have laws in place that require groups that are advocating for the interest of a foreign country and getting financing in order to do that they have to basically register as an agent of a foreign country. People have gone to prison for failing to do so. That was one of the laws called FARA that they used to try and prosecute some of Trump's associates, claiming that they were acting on behalf of foreign governments and didn't disclose it. And the argument has always been from AIPAC, well, we don't have to register as agents of a foreign country because we're not agents of Israel. We're American citizens who just happen to believe that it is in the interest of our country, the United States, and our fellow citizens to do everything possible to support Israel, to pay for its military, to finance all of its wars, to isolate ourselves on the world stage in order to protect Israel. What is your reporting? What kind of light does it shed on that question? Not necessarily with regard to AIPAC, but this entire universe of pro-Israel organizations operating in the United States based on the claim that they're operating independently of and not as agents of the Israeli government.
Just before I answer that, I want to add one point to your previous question to Jack.
No, you have to just answer that. Yeah, I'm not interested in your separate point. No, I'm just kidding. Go ahead.
No, but, for the Hillel statement, protecting Jewish safety and fighting anti-Semitism on campus, I don't see any problem with that. That's great. And that's an important cause. But you see what he does there with the strategic guidance of the Ministry of Diaspora Affairs, with funding from the Israeli government. He's saying that we're also pushing back on student groups that are criticizing Israel. And we're fighting to say, that we're fighting to protect Israel from criticism on college campuses. That's an entirely different story. And conflating the two is very dangerous. And in terms of this question about foreign lobbying and foreign registration, since the 1930s, we've had the Foreign Agent Registration Act, FARA. That's to, just require lobbyists who are representing foreign governments to do some basic registration, to disclose their activities. There's a really fascinating history in this we don't have time to get into around AIPAC and many of these pro-Israel groups and kind of dodging these regulations for decades. But what's incredible here is that we have documented evidence of groups that are heavily funded by the Israeli government, at least historically and likely today, that are now staffed, even some of them by Israeli intelligence officers or former intelligence officers, who are taking credit for lobbying and enacting law and lobbying Congress to help encourage congressional investigations. They're meeting with lawmakers every day. And none of these groups that we've discussed today have registered under FARA. And FARA is not just about money. You don't have to receive a dime from a foreign government. If you're taking coordinated action to shape public policy and public opinion on behalf of foreign government, you still have to register. So these groups that have taken money, that's a trigger, they should register. But for the ones that are openly coordinating, we've listed all these Knesset hearings and other examples of clear coordination in addition to the money. None of them have registered. It just seems like a very lopsided enforcement of the law, especially if you look at since 2016, after the Russian meddling kind of scandal controversy in that presidential election, we've had a huge increase in enforcement of FARA. FARA, which is enforced by the Department of Justice, there have been many enforcement cases, many civil and criminal actions, but nothing in terms of pro-Israel advocacy groups where there's documented ties to the Israeli government.
Yeah, it's amazing. There's so much obsession, of course, with Russia's alleged interference in our sacred democracy and influence campaigns. People claim they're concerned about that when it comes to governments like Qatar and Qatari money. And yet this is so far beyond any of that, especially given the relationship between the United States and Israel, that it's almost impossible to feign concern for those other involvements of foreign governments in our political affairs while being indifferent to this massive, long-standing, multi-pronged campaign of the Israeli government, not only to manipulate our discourse, but to facilitate all kinds of changes to our colleges, to our laws, to our free speech rights. It's really quite extraordinary. As I said, we didn't even cover all the independent important revelations in your article, so I encourage people to go and read that. Congratulations to both of you on this important story, and I really appreciate your taking the time to join us to talk about it tonight.
Thanks, Glenn. Thank you so much.
Yeah, have a great night. Thanks for watching this clip from System Update, our live show that airs every Monday through Friday at 7 p.m. Eastern, exclusively on Rumble. You can catch the full nightly shows live or view the backlog of episodes for free on our Rumble page. You can also find full episodes the morning after they air across all major podcasting platforms, including Spotify and Apple. All the information you need is linked below. We hope to see you there.